Hey there guys, welcome to today's live stream. So for today, there's not really much that I have to discuss beforehand. Everything's pretty much already set. I did do a live stream yesterday on Instagram. I'm going to continue to say that. I do have my Instagram live streams every Tuesday. I've been doing them in the morning, and this one I usually do sort of midday. So again, most of them, as far as the topics for each live stream, they're different topics that I discuss to kind of keep things fresh and to not keep things as repetitive. So I'm going to be discussing different topics, and I know I mentioned last week, I'm going to mention it again. I am actually going to be doing more of like body weight workouts on the live streams with my Instagram, sort of adding a little bit more visual to a lot of my content as it relates to that. So definitely watch for that. So that'll likely be in the next week or so that I'll do those types of live streams, and I'll let you guys know when I'll be doing those. So I'm gradually implementing more visual based content. That way it'll help give you guys a little bit more value, and it helps to sort of expand on the topics that I talk about when I'm talking about specific exercises, whether it be like the topic today, stretching, or any kind of flexibility core-based training that's really easy to explain that you can do at home. So I do want to sort of add that I'm going to start implementing those types of live streams with more visuals in the near future. So it'll likely be in the next couple of weeks I'll be doing those types of live streams. They're going to be on Instagram for the moment because I'm going to try to test them out. Instagram's kind of been my testing ground as far as for the live streams, as far as different topics that I'll talk about. So definitely watch those on there. I usually try to share a link here on Facebook to get to those live streams on Instagram because they are on my separate on a separate page, of course. So you can definitely watch those there. But again, I'll continue to do the Facebook live streams. They'll likely stay as a presentation like I normally do. But again, I'm going to start adding more visuals even in these types of presentations. So, with all that being said, what I'm going to talk about today is about stretching and basically why it's important to add to your workout routine, why you should use it as a warm up, as a cool down, and things of that nature in your workout. So, I'm basically going to talk about different types of stretches today, what these stretches target, what their specific actions are, I guess you would say. So there's various stretches such as static, dynamic, as well as SMR, which is self-myofascial rolling, which I'll discuss a little bit more. And each of these target specific groups of muscles or are focused on a particular muscle. So when it comes to stretching and exercises, basically all of this involves the human movement system, which is basically known as the kinetic chain and comprises the human body of the muscular, skeletal, and nervous systems. So when I'm talking about the human movement system, this is connected to stretching. It's all in the same topic, and it has a connection to what I'm talking about today. But basically what the human movement system is just the different parts of our body, the different systems that are comprised of movement that we do in our daily lives. So whether it be exercise or activities of daily living that we normally do, the human movement system, which is the muscular, skeletal, and nervous system, they all play a role in each of these types of movements. Any kind of movement that we do through our days, it is involved with the human movement system. So to put it simply, it's just basically the group, the muscular system, the skeletal system, nervous system, all put together in one. That's all basically to sum up what the human movement system is. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about mainly the condensed topic today, which is primarily focused on stretching. So like I've sort of mentioned before, I'm going to start making things a little bit more visual, and I'm going to start getting more detailed in particular on certain topics. Because I know in the past I've sort of talked a little bit broad about some topics, but now I'm going to start getting a little bit more into detail and explaining a little bit more about these particular topics that I'm talking about. So there's three things that I'm going to discuss, like I mentioned, which is static stretching, dynamic stretching, and SMR, which is self-myofascial rolling. So static stretching is the first thing I'm going to discuss, and it's basically defined as the process of passively taking a muscle to a point of tension and holding that stretch for a minimum of 30 seconds. So training with static stretching usually is done for about 1 to 3 sets. Again, it's 1 to 3 sets and you're holding that specific stretch for 30 seconds. So there are different reasons for using static stretching. And one of the primary reasons, and I always bring this back up, is muscle imbalances. So if there's a particular muscle, if you do certain exercises and you're sort of not doing form correctly or you're having trouble with form, then that likely shows that you have a particular muscle imbalance. So the way to sort of correct that and to help sort of, I guess, optimize your form is to stretch those particular muscles. So there's a static stretch for pretty much every specific muscle in your body. I mean, you can pretty much stretch any particular muscle, and each of these stretches will target that specific muscle instead of just targeting a group of muscles. So there's so many different stretches that I could talk about. And for example, here is one. This is a static 90 by 90 hamstring stretch. So this is an example of just one static stretch you can do, and there's multiple others. But basically with this stretch, sort of the technique with this is to lie supine with one hip flexed 90 degrees and the opposite leg and flat on the floor. Straighten the target leg until a mild stretch is felt in your hamstrings, and then you would use a rope band, which you can use at the gym, to stretch that muscle. So this stretch should not cause any pain or discomfort. Of course, if it does, then you would need to stop, but that's basically stretching that hamstring muscle. So if you have an imbalance in that muscle, like for example, if you're doing maybe like a sort of like a deadlift, any particular deadlift, like a dumbbell deadlift, barbell deadlift, any kind of deadlift like that, which is a muscle that, or an exercise that primarily targets sort of the hamstring area, or any other exercise you're doing that's targeting the hamstrings. If you are noticing that your form is sort of off and your posture is not correct, then stretching would be a good idea for that particular muscle if the hamstrings is sort of the target there. Now there's different ones, of course, like I discussed. I mean, there's so many different stretches. You have the adductor stretch as well. You have hip flexor, TFL stretch. You have spine stretch, lat stretch, pectoral stretch, upper trapezius stretch, and then you have the sternocleidomastoid stretch, which is basically sort of your neck. So there's so many different types of stretches when it comes to just even just static stretching themselves. There's so many different stretches you can try. And again, like I mentioned, I'm going to do one particular live stream where I'm going to go through these specific stretches. So like I said, I'm going to get more visual and I'm going to start showing more examples of how you do these stretches. With static stretches, it's really simple because what you see here is basically what you do. There's no other movement that's done. Static stretching is really simple. It's just one particular movement that you're doing. For example, you're using the band to hold that stretch for 30 seconds. You're going to hold this stretch like here that I've got pictured here. You would just hold that for 30 seconds. You would stop, do another set, hold that for 30 seconds, stop, do another set, and hold it for 30 seconds. And that's pretty much what a static stretch is. So the next thing I'm going to discuss here is SMR, which is static or self-myofascial rolling, in other words. So basically what this is sort of somewhat similar to static stretching, except that you're using a foam roller, basically. So this technique is used for treating and breaking up adhesions of the fascia, which is part of the muscle, and surrounding muscle tissue. These examples include foam rolling and self-massage. So this is primarily, these types of sort of stretches are primarily focused on using the foam roller. They have the sort of same benefits as a static stretch, except it's going to help with a little bit more, you're able to do a little bit more movement with this type of stretch than you would a static stretch. But you're still going to hold that movement for 30 seconds like you do with a static stretch, if that makes sense. So what I've got pictured here is an example of a SMR calf stretch. So basically what you're doing with this is you would have a foam roller just roughly under your calves. So you're going to cross one leg on top of the other, and then you're going to use the increased pressure of the calf to roll along the length of the calf muscle. So this is a little bit more active than your normal static stretch. So basically you're going to just roll that calf muscle. You're going to go over that foam roller back and forth. And again, I'm going to expand on these and talk more about these when I do sort of the exercise-based live streams. But that's basically what you do is you're just rolling that particular muscle. Now there's multiple SMR exercises you can do, or stretches I guess I should say, that you can do, such as hamstrings. For example, with the hamstring, it's very similar to the calves, except of course it's going to be a little bit more under your leg, closer to your glute area, and you're just going to sort of roll over that same muscle. Quadriceps, like the front of your leg, you would basically just lay down and you would have your upper leg laying on the foam roller. And again, I will do an example of these in the near future of what they are. But I do want to show you sort of a picture and a visual of what this is. And what she's showing here is pretty much exactly what you do. The only thing is you would be moving your leg slowly back and forth on the foam roller. So that's basically an example of what an SMR stretch is. And again, like with the static stretches, these types of stretches can target so many different muscles. Like I just mentioned, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your thigh, spine, lats. This type of stretch can target so many different muscles. And sort of to mention again, the purpose of these stretches are to help sort of optimize your posture, to help with any muscle imbalances you have, and it's going to help optimizing your performance on any workouts that you do. So when you add these to your sort of your workout routine, it's going to help with your other exercises that you're doing that's more high impact, I guess I should say, because a lot of these stretches that you're doing are sort of a warm up and a cool down phase of your workout. So you're not just, doing these like a typical exercise, you're doing these more as to help with optimizing your workout that you're preparing for. And of course, to help you cool down after your workout's finished. So another thing I'm going to discuss is active stretching. These are basically like static stretching, but with movement, is basically the way that you sum up these types of stretches. So these stretches use agonists and synergists, which is basically two types of muscles that are pretty much working together to perform the motion. So these stretches, of course, they use the agonists and synergists to dynamically move the joint into a range of motion. That includes holding a stretch position for 1 to 2 seconds and then repeating that specific stretch for 10 to 15 reps. So again, this is more like your typical exercise where you're doing a particular movement for a couple seconds and then you're going to repeat it like a rep, like you would a normal exercise. So this is basically what an active stretch is. So what I've got here is an example, step by step, of how you would do this particular active stretch. So again, this is more like a lunge based stretch. And for this stretch, you'd be on basically a mat. So it's a kneeling, it's like a lunge, but it's a kneeling hip flexor stretch. And you would have a mat. You don't need any equipment when you're doing these types of stretches. So basically you would be kneeling with your front and back legs at a 90-degree angle. Well, with your front leg more at a 90-degree angle and your back leg sort of bent towards the floor. You would draw on your navel and posteriorly rotate. So you would rotate your pelvis area to the side. You would squeeze your glutes and then squeeze your glute muscles and the side being stretched. And then as a progression, I guess I should say, you would raise your arm to one side and then up over to the opposite side while maintaining your pelvis position, and then hold that side bend position and then slowly rotate back. So you're basically sort of just, again, it's like a static stretch, but you're doing a little bit more movement. So you're gonna basically go into a lunge, hold your arm up, and then rotate your torso, hold that for a couple seconds, and then go back into having your arm raised, and then lower your arm, and stay in that lunge position at the same time. So while you're doing this, of course, you're going to stay in that lunge. You're just going to have your arm up, you're going to rotate your torso, and then you're going to go back into that tall arm position, and then you're going to put your arms down. So that's basically summing up what this active stretch is. And again, like with any other stretch, there's multiple different stretches that you can do. There's a pectoral stretch, there's a lat stretch, upper trapezius stretch, sternocleidomastoid stretch, which is your neck, and there's so many others that can be discussed. So again, I will expand on this later on, but I do want to show you a sort of visual example, step by step, on what an active stretch is, sort of to differentiate between the static, the SMR, and the active, just so you can see sort of the difference between the three. So there's a fourth one that I'm going to discuss here, and this is dynamic stretching. Dynamic stretches focus on using force production of a muscle and the body's momentum to take the joint into a full available range of motion. So with dynamic stretching, the recommended guideline is 1 set, 10 to 15 reps, and 3 to 10 exercises. So basically for a dynamic stretch, it's more like your typical exercise. So what I've got pictured here is a prisoner squat. It's basically like a normal squat. Of course, you would have your arms behind your head, you would squat down, you would do that for 10 to 15 reps, and then you would move on to another exercise sort of related to those particular muscles that you're targeting that day. So like I mentioned before, each of these target a specific muscle. So it's best to sort of target those muscles that you're working out that particular day. So like if you're working legs, maybe doing a quad stretch, glute stretch, hamstring stretch, any kind of stretch that's sort of in that muscle group would sort of be best to target. And the same goes for these dynamic stretches. Whatever you're doing, as long as you're sort of focusing on that muscle group for that particular day that you're working out, if you're doing that particular split with legs, just sort of focus on that set of muscle groups, I guess you would say. And again, like if you're targeting a different split, then sort of focus on those muscle groups to stretch, if that makes sense. So again, you're not just doing things randomly. You sort of want to have a structure into how you do these types of stretches. So again, so many different types of dynamic stretches. You have a lunge with rotation stretch. You've got a multiplanar lunge with reach, I guess I should say. So multiplanar is basically moving in sort of different planes of motion, which I will show in the near future what that means. You have so many other ones such as leg swings front to back. You have a side to side leg swing, high knees, push up with rotation, ball rush and twist. So all of these are basically examples of that dynamic stretch. So controversial stretching, basically what this is, I sort of want to discuss these a little bit. But these are stretches that are basically not really recommended to do because they could cause injury. And I just want to sort of mention these sort of as a precaution, like if you was to, like search the internet and you've seen certain stretches, it's sort of best to be aware what types of stretches are not really recommended that could sort of be a cause for concern and to lead to injury. So controversial stretches are types of stretching that may have a potential risk of injury. So in other words, these types of stretches could be potentially dangerous to perform. You may have seen these stretches before, and that's why I sort of wanted to mention it. So what is pictured here is actually an inverted hurdler stretch. So this stretch is thought to place high stress on the inside of the knee, and it may cause pain and stress in the patella. This stretch should not be performed by anybody with a history of knee or low back injury. So if you have that particular sort of ailment, then you should not perform that particular stretch. There's so many others that I could discuss, um, such as like the plow pose, you have the shoulder stand, straight leg toe touch, and then the arching quadriceps. So a lot of these, really it's not as important to go into these because these are exercises that or stretches that you shouldn't really implement into your workout routine. But the reason why I'm talking about these is you may see them online, or you may see them maybe not on a more credible source, I guess you would say, or somebody who may be teaching it and doesn't have the science-based backing, knowing what that particular stretch does. So that's something to just keep in mind and be aware of these types of stretches. Alrighty, so that's basically all I have to discuss with you guys today. I hope that you found this valuable. I hope that the information came across well. I try to explain it in the best way I can and show you guys a little bit of a visual aid on these types of stretches. And I'm going to continue to do that and explain a little bit more on what these stretches are, go into a little bit more detail. I am likely, this will be probably the first live stream I do, is sort of basically demonstrating these different types of stretches that you can perform and show you a little bit step by step on how to perform these and how it will help you sort of optimize your posture, help you with those muscle imbalances that you may have, and help you to sort of prevent injury, because injury cannot be fully preventable really, but you can still take sort of precautions and measures to help sort of alleviate it and to sort of prevent it to happen less often, I guess you would say. Because I've injured myself, I've mentioned it a couple of times, and a lot of it is partly my fault because of my posture, or I wasn't doing something correctly, which I've learned, of course, as I've become a trainer. I've learned the reasoning behind why I've injured myself. So, again, thank you guys for taking the time to watch this. I hope you found it valuable. I hope that it helps. Again, I'm going to start expanding on these topics, giving you a visual aid on how to do these particular stretches, whether it be SMR stretches, static stretches, dynamic stretches, or anything of that sort, active stretches as well. So if you have any questions, I have my email and phone number here. If you want to contact me with anything that I've discussed today in the live stream, or if there's any previous live streams I've done that you want to talk about, you can always reach out to me with those topics as well, and I'll be willing to answer your questions in the best way that I can. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys likely next Wednesday in the next live stream. So thank you guys.